Welcome to the last Finding Your Place class. This is the last one in our series, and we're going to end with the E in place, which covers our experiences of life. And so far in this study, you've learned about your personality, your spiritual gifts, your abilities awareness, the passion groups you have or compassions, and now we go to experiences. And so let's go ahead and turn in your workbooks to page 50, and this is where we'll begin our study today. And as we start this study, let's start with a passage in Romans. If you have your Bibles, turn to Romans chapter 8. We'll be starting and looking at verse 28. Romans chapter 8 in verse 28. In Romans chapter 8 in verse 28, it reads, "And we know God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." And one thing I want to bring out is that God does not say that all experiences are good. And as we live life, we understand that there's many different experiences that we have in this life. But what he does say is that he causes all experiences to work for good. And because we would look at different things that happen in life. Certainly someone losing a job is not a good experience, and nor would we ever admit that or say that. But for those who love God, the experience can work for good. And that's the difference there that we want to notice. And keep in mind that we cannot always see in the here and now how God works out every experience for good. We have to get to heaven one day to understand how he worked some of those experiences for good. When it comes to the experiences in our own life, I want us to start thinking about it in this way. The different things that have shaped us and molded us and really caused us to be the person and the people we are today. And I believe as we jump into this E in the word place and talking about experiences, you're going to start to notice some of the type of different experiences that probably have shaped and molded you and helped you and will help you in finding your place. Because the truth is, there are many different types of life experiences that have shaped us into who we are today. And so as we start this study today, we're going to be looking at page 50. And let's go ahead and look at some different type of life experiences that can start to shape us into who we are. And the title of page 50 is Finding Your Place Through Experiences. Well, one of the first things and things I really want to bring out in here is that there are spiritual experiences. And these spiritual experiences can be something that can shape us and mold us into who we are. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 3. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 21. So if you have your Bible, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 3. I'm going to be reading verses 1 through 21. And here we're going to be looking at when the Lord called Samuel and the different details at which are part of this story. Let's read it. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli. And the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There were no frequent vision. And at that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, "Here am I," and ran to Eli and said, "Here am I, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So he went and lay down. And the Lord called again, "Samuel." And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, "Here am I, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call you, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here am I, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood, calling at other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, Speak, for your servant hears. Then the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which the 2 ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. Samuel lay until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. But Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he said, Here am I. Eli said, What was it that he told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you and more, also if you hide anything from me of all that he told you. So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And so we see in this chapter, 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 1 through 21, where the Lord is calling Samuel, and as he's sleeping there, it's really interesting that he first thinks that Eli is waking up in the middle of the night and calling out his name, and so he goes to him a few different times, and each time Eli's telling him to go back to sleep, and finally Eli perceives that maybe it's God talking to him, maybe it's the Lord, and so he informs him what to do if that happens again. Of course, Samuel does that. He listens to the Lord, and the interesting thing is the Lord speaks about Eli and his family and his sons in particular who blaspheme against him, and what was going to be the consequence of that. And then Samuel is waking up in the morning and having to reveal that information to Eli. As we look at this story from the scriptures, we see of really a spiritual experience happening. And as we try to understand that, it's the spiritual experience that Samuel went through that provided the calling God gave for Samuel's lifelong ministry. And I understand that while many may not have an experience as dramatic as this one, of course, some do have dramatic spiritual experiences that shape their entire life and the ministry they should fulfill in the church. And maybe sometimes these are things that happen to a person, a Christian, where it really throws them flat on the back, where the only person and way they can look up to is to God. An example of that, I think, sometimes are people and individuals who have had near-death experiences, who, through that experience, has really given them some new direction in their life. And so one of the things that are going to shape us in our life when we look at experiences is spiritual experiences. The second one that we want to look at is religious educational experiences. Religious educational experiences. So the first blank on that page will be spiritual experiences. The next one there will be religious educational experiences. In Acts chapter 26, I'll be reading Acts 26 verses 4 and 5. Acts chapter 26 verses 4 and 5. And the Bible reads, The Jews all know the way I have lived ever since I was a child, from the beginning of my life in my own country and also in Jerusalem. They have known me for a long time and can testify, if they are willing, that according to the strict sect of our religion, I lived as a Pharisee. So when we think about religious educational experiences, this is something that molds us and shapes us in experiences that we even deal with today that shape us into who we are. We read this passage, we read about Paul's experiences. Paul's experiences in his religious upbringing were used by God in several ways, just as the things that we learn can be used in our life today. For instance, for Paul, gave him credibility with the Jewish converts to Christianity. It allowed him to persuade Jews to convert Christianity or to Christianity because he knew the scriptures that spoke of the coming Messiah. It gave Paul the ability to dialogue with people of other religions because he understood religious thinkers and how they reasoned and how they thought. I think often that we may take for granted our own religious upbringing. Many of us have grown up in the church and have been in Bible class from day one. Our parents took us to church and we had Bible studies at home, and we constantly were learning more about God and His Word, what He wanted us to do. But often we also overlook that educational experience that we have. It's interesting sometimes to think of it this way, that those who have been raised in the church frequently do not comprehend the value of their own religious upbringing. And I believe far too often Christians put on a pedestal those who have gone through this overtly ungodly life filled with glamorous sins to eventually make it to Christianity. And in some ways, they become celebrities for their past life. We need to help those with a church background or a less dramatic life realize that their experiences of walking faithfully with God can be used just as much in fulfilling God's purpose for their lives and His kingdom. And so we are shaped by our spiritual experiences, sometimes difficult experiences that lay us flat on our back where we're looking up to God. But also we don't need to overlook our own religious educational experiences, just like Paul had, and he was able to use those for the benefit of the kingdom. But lastly, we also want to recognize that sometimes we have painful experiences that make up our life as well. I'm going to be reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, 3 through 5. And the passage says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows." And I believe for many Christians, their painful experiences will be the guide to the ministry that they have within the church setting. An example of that is one time when this material was being taught to a group in Atlanta, Georgia, as a young couple sat very quietly throughout the whole workshop. And after talking about painful experiences and reading the 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5 passage, the husband raises his hand and asks if he can make a comment. And he told that 3 weeks earlier, he and his wife had lost a child. The wife had carried the child to term and found out right before she was delivered that the child was dead. But she would have to go through the delivery, and she would deliver a stillborn. And as the husband told the story, tears began to flow down his cheeks as he saw through this verse, this passage, that God would use his experience in their lives for His purpose in their ministries within the church. And after the husband finished, the wife asked if she could say something. And she told how her church had loved them beyond their wildest imaginations. She realized that God was teaching them how to love those who've gone through different painful experiences. The presence of God filled the room as the couple poured out their hearts. And as this story has been retold to others, it has ministered in incredible ways to those who have lost loved ones as well. That leads us down this path when we think about painful experiences. And there's some different questions I want to ask you at this point. And as we continue throughout our workbook here, on our next section, I want us to lead us down this path. And the question is this: I want you to be thinking about, what are some painful experiences that are common to us? And better yet, what are some painful experiences that have shaped you? When you think about over your life so far, what are some of those painful experiences? And on our page, I want us to look at that. I want us to mark some of the different painful experiences that are there for us. And of course, for many, we may think of divorce as something that has been a painful experience that you've had to deal with. Maybe for some others, it's the loss of a job, or maybe it's an emotional abuse. But again, there's many more. And as you think about the different painful experiences, maybe you are like you come up with a number of different things that have impacted your life that maybe you've experienced or you've seen others experience that are common to many around us, especially in the life of our church. Maybe you've noticed that some of the painful experiences that you've seen or dealt with in your family or yourself or around you have been people that dealt with mental illness, maybe going through a natural disaster, or maybe have gone through a betrayal or an affair, and maybe have dealt with a breach of trust by someone close to them. Maybe chronic sickness has been there for you, loneliness. Maybe you've gone through infertility struggles. Maybe you've gone through physical abuse, sexual abuse, falsely being accused. Maybe you've gone through a family member having to go through incarceration, being in jail long term or short term. Different lifestyle choices, addictions, rejection, persecution, embarrassment. Maybe you've had to go through or see someone go through bankruptcy or financial issues or losing a home. All these are painful experiences that really shape us into who we are or who we become. And all these are things that change us, I believe, from the inside out and outside in. As we continue in finding our place through experience, not just can painful experiences shape our place, but also we have two more areas here that we want to also include. And first, is considering this experience, the experience of failure. As we make this transition from painful experiences, we also, even though failure can also feel painful, I believe that failure can really shape us into who we are, maybe even the ministry towards which we minister in. I'm going to be reading from Matthew chapter 26. This is Matthew 26, verses 69 through 75. Matthew chapter 26, 69 through 75. And I think we can learn something from the life of Peter when it comes to failure and how it really shapes us, helps us to learn. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath. "I don't know the man." And after a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you're one of them, for your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. As we take into account this passage, it's interesting. I think there's some things that we can take into account and learn ourselves. The Bible never says anything else about Peter's denial, but what we do know from tradition is that he died a martyr's death. And it's believed he was crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die the same way that Christ was crucified. This experience of failure would certainly have impacted not only his life, but countless others who have experienced failure, because Peter no doubt found his place by learning from his failure. So we've covered the idea that painful experiences, and we know that through those painful experiences, they shape us and mold us into who we are today, and likely into the ministries that we serve in, the people groups that we serve in. But we also know that failure can shape us in our place. But also, let's consider this. What about victorious experiences? Because I believe that there's victorious experiences, things that we go through in this life that can really shape us and move us and mold us into who we are. And I want to look at Genesis chapter 32. We hear about Jacob. In Genesis chapter 32, verse 28, let's read. It says this. It says, "Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." You see Jacob's struggle not only changed his life, but the course of history. An entire people and nation are named after him. Names in the Old Testament have great significance, as we know, and his name was given through an experience when he triumphed over adversity. So victorious experiences shape our place as well. I now want us to turn in our book to page 51. Page 51 in our workbook. Again, on the slide here, we have the picture of our place profile that we're constantly building upon each week. We've added our personality and spiritual gifts, our abilities, awareness, our compassions, and now we're going to be starting to work on our E there, which is the experiences that have really shaped us and impacted our lives. I'm going to read through the directions on page 51. On the left-hand side of 51, I want you to do what the directions tell you to do. And then I'm going to tell you more about the right-hand side of that page. On page 51, it says, "In what experiences have you had success or victory or triumph?" The experiences listed below are listed as examples. Reflect upon your experiences and write them down. And so what I want you to do is I want you to go through on page 51 and maybe mark some of the things that you've had successes in or triumphs and mark those. If there's others that you come up with, I want you to write those down. And then on the right-hand side of the page where it says others, I want you to use that blank area to simply take this time to write down any life experiences that you can come up with from the moment that you're born till now that have impacted your life. And those things can be exciting things like, maybe the being saved or getting married or seeing your kids born, or maybe they can be really difficult, painful things that you've dealt with. Maybe you've lost someone in your family. Maybe you have, been abandoned or rejected, or maybe you've been abused in some way, or you've had some traumatic experience. This is the section I want you to really reflect on. What are all the different experiences in your life so far that you've had to deal with that have probably shaped you in some way? So I want you to use this page to work on that. Excuse me. Once you finish that, I want you to go ahead and transfer those different experiences of your life onto your place profile, which is on here on this slide here. And at this time, if you want, you can go ahead and hit pause and spend some time working on that. And after which, you can hit play again and we'll resume. Now that you've worked on your place profile, it looks more complete at this point. And remember, your top page, the white page, is what you're going to be giving to me. The carbon copy will be yours. And then, again, as I've mentioned to our classes, all the classes so far, my agreement with each class is each individual, if they would like, I'd spend an hour with them walking through their place profile and matching that up with ministries inside our congregation, and even talk to you about things that maybe are on your profile that, or maybe areas that you need to be working in that we don't offer yet, and working with you to help you to come up with that ministry and form a team of people that can work with you from that view. The next thing we're going to be working on is what makes experiences different from abilities. And so in your books, go ahead and turn to page 52. Page 52 will be the next section we're going to be working on. And on this page, again, we're asking what makes experiences different from abilities. And so if you notice there on your as you fill this in on page 52, is the first thing is that experiences are specific events and times you can recall. So when we we're looking for the differences in this, that's one of the things we want to mention there. But also, secondly, that successful experiences are evaluated by your determination of successes and not others. And so, when we think about this, experiences may seem close to abilities, but experiences are specific events and times you can recall where you have done something you consider successful or productive, even if it may have been also painful. The key is your evaluation of the specific event or situation as to its success. So don't look at the experience as a success by what others believe, but what you determine success to mean. That's the focus that we want to look at when it comes to this. Now that we're moving on to page 53 in our workbook. It's entitled Steps in Making the Most Out of Significant Experiences. Obviously, the push for us always is to be looking at life in that way. How can we make the most out of these experiences? Our life is full of them. From the moment we were born, there's different things, negative and positive, that we can look back on. Those are what we're trying to tap into, because in most cases, the things that have been a part of our life like that are most likely going to shape our passion groups as well, and also shape and really direct us into the ministries that we're in and the people groups we're going to minister to. And so we want to really pay close attention to these experiences, but also like we talked about last time with the different passion groups as well. So as we take steps in making the most out of significant experiences, there are some things that we want to take note of. And as we go down the list, it looks just like this. Next, we want to consider this. Acknowledge that you've survived or thrived. In many cases, you may look back and think, I survived that event. I've made it past that event. That event's not a part of my current life right now, but it's something that God allowed me to go through. Maybe He allowed me to go through some abuses or an accident that could have been deadly for me, or maybe I shouldn't even be here today, but He allowed me to survive, and maybe He did that for a reason. And now I need to thrive. I need to use this in my own life now to reach out to other people and minister to people who are going through something similar. But also we need to do this. We need to write down any lessons that we learn. What lessons have you learned from the things that you've dealt with so far? Have you been incarcerated? What are the lessons that you've learned from that? Have you had to go through bankruptcy or financial issues? What have you learned from that? Have you lost someone in your life? What are things that you've gained from that and learned from that? What does God allow you to see through that? What are maybe you've gone through abuses in your life or mistreatments. Maybe you've gone through some great and positive experiences. What lessons have you taken away from those things? What have you learned? And write them down. Next, we need to do this. As we acknowledge these things and we have survived and thrived and we're writing things down, there's times where we need to clean up some messes and turn them into successes. What are things that are undone? What are some things that we need to go after and turn into successes that are turned into possible ministries for us and groups that we can really help? And then next we need to do this. We need to take time to update our story. The things that have happened to us, sometimes the labels that we live out in our life are not necessarily who we are. Maybe we need to update our story. Maybe we need to be able to cope with some things that have been a part of our story in our life. Maybe we need to change some distorted ways of thinking about our story and update those things. And as we acknowledge them, realize that we've survived and now we're thriving, we write down these lessons and ways of viewing things as we clean up some of these messes and turn them into successes. Now we can update that story. And then we do this. We set new goals. We go after it. And we don't stop. We keep going. Because experiences are always continuous. They never stop. They're dynamic. They're never stagnant. And we need to be challenged in this. We need to make sure that we're going through these step by step and updating our story along the way. Next, I want you to turn to page 55. Page 55, where we're evaluating experiences and finding our place. And there's some questions here that we want to consider. And I realize as I talk through this, you may need to hit the pause button and spend some time writing the answer. And I would encourage you to do that as you cover this. You hear me ask a question from this page, feel free to hit the pause button, reflect on it, write down some answers and some comments here as we do this to gain the most out of this experience. The first question on page 55 says, why was I successful or unsuccessful in this experience? So maybe at this time you think back to some of the experiences that really have been a big part of your life. Maybe you lost someone or were abused or dealt with a traumatic event. Answer this question. Why was I successful or unsuccessful in this event? Spend some time answering that question. The next question says, was the successful experience rewarding? And use some time answering that question. The next question is, if the experience was successful but not rewarding, then why? And how would you answer that? Next, if the experience was rewarding but not successful, then why? Spend a few moments answering that question. And next, could I take a successful but unrewarding experience and use some of the skills that made me successful to determine what I could do that is rewarding? Spend a few minutes reading through that and answering that question. And here I want to bring out that one of the key thoughts is that a successful experience is not necessarily always a rewarding one. Now, after you've completed page 55, I want you now to turn to page 56. Page 56. And on this page, we're starting to look at really what is considered reflection. And in each week, we've gone through and we've reflected upon different things that we've been learning so far. And we want to do the same thing here as well. And so it says reflection. The Bible is very clear that we are to not only be hearers and learners, but doers as well. James chapter 1, verse 22. And I want you to think back to at least two experiences that have been defining experiences in your life. And I want you to describe what it was about those experiences that impacted who you are today. So on page 56, I want you to spend some time responding to that answer there as you reflect back on that. And when you're done, if you need to now, you can hit pause and write down your answer and then hit play again. The reminder on this page says, God never said all your experiences would be good, but He did say He would use all experiences for good. These include the experiences of pain and failure, along with spiritual and religious and victorious experiences. God can and does hit some straight licks with crooked sticks. And so now we're to the remember section. Experiences shape our life. What types of experiences have shaped yours? And how would you answer that question? What would you list down here? Spend a few moments doing that. Hit pause if you need to and play again when you're ready. The process does not end with the self-discovery you've made by going through finding your place. The Bible is very clear that we are to not only be hearers and learners, but doers, as we see there in James chapter 1, verse 22. The process of finding your place just has begun. To continue the journey, you must get now involved. And so now I want you to turn to page 57. And at the top of page 57, it says, so what? And each week we've done this. We walk through this section of each and every section and answering these questions in this way. And more of this has been from the idea of understanding ourselves. And as we've added the different elements each week, we've always ended up at the end of these different sections asking and responding to these statements here. It says, understanding myself helps me. And so I want you to do just that. So the first one says, understanding myself helps me realize my personality, spiritual gifts, abilities, and passion may not have consciously played a part in my previous ministry experiences. Can you see where your previous ministry experiences have been chosen according to your personality and or spiritual gifts? I want you to spend a few minutes answering that question. Next, understanding myself helps me understand why my experiences have helped formulate and at times change my passion for certain ministries and or people. If this has happened, what ministries and or people do you have a passion to serve? How would you answer that question? Write down the answer to that at this time. Next, understanding myself helps me desire to use my unique God-given design to explore further where God may place me in making a difference. And I love the poem here, and we're going to be wrapping up this last section with this poem. And this is on page 57 as well in your book as we reflect upon it. Flatter me, and I may not believe you. Criticize me, and I may not like you. Ignore me, and I may not forgive you. Encourage me, and I will not forget you. May finding your place be an encouragement to you as you give your life away for our Lord and His people. May these principles impact your life in such a way that it will affect you in the choices you make in this journey as we call life. And I want to end with this passage of Scripture. I think that it really encompasses everything that we've been working towards in all the weeks that we've been working towards our place profile. And it's this passage here in Matthew 16, verse 25. We'll end our place class on this. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. Thank you for being a part of finding your place.